Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Kamens. I'm the co-chair of the Hazel PTA Advocacy Committee. We came together to help advocate for communities at risk in our larger school community. We've rapidly expanded and been joined by many parents from across the district, which is great. And we're really happy to put on this Know Your Rights event. I want to acknowledge that it is Ramadan, so we're missing people who are breaking fast as well as Purim. We are recording this, which we'll make available on the district website as well as our information and resource hub, which we'll share at the end. Um, Want to caveat that things are rapidly changing, so we will try to update that recording as things change and keep everybody in the loop the best we can. I'm also joined by Mr. Felix Plata, the supervisor of world languages and ESL, and the president of the West Orange Hispanic Foundation, Kira Gill, who's the Hazel PTA president, and Christina Ramos, who is a Gregory parent and also on the advocacy committee with us. Um, Now I want to hand it over to our presenter, who we're very grateful for for her time and doing this. Jeanne LoCicero is the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey, and very grateful to have her here. And handing it off to you to kick things off. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds great. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me to present to you tonight. I'm really thrilled to be able to share this information with you. And I'm going to start sharing my screen.
At this time, with the other panelists, yep, thank you very much.
Okay. Did that work?
Yes, you are all set.
Okay. Sorry, little technical difficulty on my end. All right, so we're going to tonight be talking about what to do if you're stopped by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And again, I'm Jeanne LoCicero. I'm the legal director here. And I was telling the other folks that West Orange has a special place in my heart because my spouse is a teacher in the district. And I know you're a really special school community and so grateful that you are informing yourselves about how you can have an impact in your local communities when it comes to this. And so let me just see, my slideshow is not advancing. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Sorry about this, folks. Just restarting PowerPoint because it seemed to have froze on me. Of course, at the worst possible time. This is looking better. And I will reshare. Okay. All right, we're back, I think. So let me get to slide. Oh, my agenda. Do you all see that?
Yes, we're on the agenda slide.
Great, thank you so much. All right. So first I'm going to roll through what is the ACLU of New Jersey. I'm going to provide you some background on the context we're in. Then we'll get into what our rights are, and then what to do if your rights have been violated. And I'm going to give a special note about ICE in schools because of your particular school community. And then we'll have time for some Q&A. And so first, I'm from the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey, and we were founded in 1960. We're nonpartisan, we're nonprofit, and we work across the political, legal, and cultural fronts to bring about systemic change and build a more equitable society. And we do that at its core. What we're working on are off of the rights that are protected by our state and federal constitutions. And we do our work in the courts, in the legislature, and in our communities. And just a note that in the aftermath of September 11th, because of the attacks on Muslim immigrants, protecting and expanding the rights of immigrants has become one of the ACLU of New Jersey's priority issues. And we work in coalition with many community groups to make our state a fairer and more welcoming one for everyone. And so this is something we are really proud to be engaged in. So I'm a lawyer, but I want to remind you all that I am not providing legal advice tonight. What I am doing is giving you general information about our rights. And so it's not a substitute for legal advice. And there are actually going to be times during the presentation where I'm going to mention that it's important to contact an attorney to get information or guidance about your specific context. And so let me just give you a little bit of context about the immigration system. Our immigration laws and the system is very complex, and how you respond to immigration and customs enforcement, or ICE, will depend on your immigration status. And so just to name a few, right? We can be citizens, and that might mean that we were born here or we became naturalized citizens. There are lawful permanent residents, and we can be green card holder. That's also another word for green card holders. And then there are different kinds of temporary statuses, like temporary workers or student visas, and temporary protected status. And then there are people who are undocumented, and that can mean that perhaps they came on a visa that then expired, or that they crossed the border without having their documents inspected. And so this presentation is going to be for everyone, but you should consult an attorney depending on your specific situation if you need particular advice. And so that's part of the context we're operating in. And then another important context we're operating in is our political moment, right? And we're all obviously aware that this administration has had dangerous rhetoric, and is implementing policies around expanding mass detention and deportation. And this slide kind of lists just a few of the executive orders and memos and policy changes that are going on at the federal level. And a lot of these issues are going to be handled by the courts, right? Some of my ACLU colleagues in other offices have been challenging these policies. And so just to say that in this heightened moment, it's really important for us to know our rights. And so we have rights, right? The United States and the New Jersey constitutions protect our rights no matter who is president. And the First Amendment establishes the right to freedom of speech and to association and to religion. The Fourth Amendment protects us against unlawful searches and seizures. And the Fifth and the 14th Amendment protects our rights to due process and equal protection of the laws. And these are just to name a few of the rights that are protected. And so the guidance that I'm providing in this presentation is really grounded in these core constitutional rights that are found in the Bill of Rights. And so regardless of the many changes that we're seeing now in immigration law and policy, these are powerful tools to protect our communities. And just as a side note, because I can't help myself, the New Jersey Constitution also protects our individual rights when it comes to our state and local government, and for example, local police officers. And that's even more protective of our rights than the federal Constitution. But the federal Constitution governs in the context of immigration. So I want to take a moment to also talk to you about rights versus reality. And the fact that we have these rights doesn't necessarily mean that immigration or police officers are going to know those rights or respect them. And we can do everything right, and we still might be detained or arrested. And the decision about whether or how to assert your rights in an encounter with either ICE or police officers can really depend on very specific things and personal things, like your immigration status, like your identity or your comfort level with confrontation, or the temperament of the law enforcement officer. And so please use your judgment and keep your safety as the most important thing to consider. And so let's get into the basics about what to do in a NICE encounter with respect to your rights. If you see immigrations and customs enforcement officers approaching you, it's really important to remain calm. Do not panic. Don't run. And of course, that's easier said than done. It can be really difficult in a moment to stay calm, but it's important for your safety and to ensure that you're calmly able to assert your rights. And so just on the running point, that can escalate the situation and can lead to a chase or an arrest. And so we strongly recommend not running. it's really important to identify the officers that might be stopping you. Ask the agents to show you their badges. You need to know what agency is actually questioning you. And so sometimes ICE agents can be a little tricky and wear uniforms or jackets that say police on the back, even though they're immigration officers. And so, that can help later on to know what kind of if you're kind of gathering information about the encounter, to know what kind of officers stopped you. So the key question to ask, sorry about that, the key question to ask is, am I free to leave? And if you are, then you have the right to calmly walk away. You also have the right to remain silent, even if officers, ICE agents, or any kind of law enforcement officers present you with a warrant. You don't have to answer any questions asked by immigration officers, including questions about your immigration status or where you were born. If you wish to exercise your right to remain silent, you should clearly state, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and then say nothing more. If an agent asks you for immigration documents, what you need to provide is going to depend on your immigration status and your personal circumstances. And so one thing to know is that under New Jersey law, you're not required to show identification to a state or local police officer unless you're driving a car or they're issuing you a summons or they request that in the course of an ongoing investigation. State and local police officers should not be asking you about your immigration status, and they do not enforce immigration laws, and even asking about that is prohibited by a statewide policy called the Immigrant Trust Directive. So that's state and local police officers. Now, if you're talking to ICE agents and they ask you for documents, what you need to provide is going to depend on your immigration status. And so generally speaking, if you have valid immigration documents and are over the age of 18, the law generally requires those documents that you carry them with you. And so that's one thing to know. And then if you don't have valid identification documents or you have identification documents from a foreign country, it's recommended that you tell officers that you want to remain silent, but you should never lie or present fake documents to law enforcement. And it's not, in most circumstances, it's not advisable to carry foreign documents. And, but it can be tricky, and this is why you're going to need to talk to a lawyer, depending on your circumstances, because there's a policy called expedited removal, which is kind of a fast track to deportation, that can be triggered if you don't have proof that you've been in the country for 2 years. So, that's it. It's a very complicated situation, and I know that because the circumstances on the ground are changing with how ICE is enforcing immigration laws, this all might change. So I'd really recommend, depending on your personal circumstances, to seek legal advice and to keep up with the changing situation. And I told the folks hosting us tonight that I will be sending along some links and to pages, and I'll be talking about them in a few slides to reputable sources for information as things change. Okay, so another thing you should know is that you have the right to refuse a search of your car, your house, your phone, or yourself. And so under the Constitution, ICE officers can't carry out searches without your consent or a valid warrant. And so we're going to discuss warrants in a couple of minutes, but it's important to remember that you do not need to agree or consent to be searched. And anything that's turned up in a search can be used against you. So if ICE doesn't have a valid warrant, clearly state to them that you are not consenting to the search. And you can simply just say, I do not consent. And if they decide to conduct the search without your consent or a warrant, don't physically interfere, right? This is one of those moments where you can do everything right and they still might violate your rights. So, but it is important to clearly state and continue to repeat that you're not consenting to this, so that there's this clear record that like they can't point to any confusion about whether you consented. All right, so you cannot be arrested for refusing to consent to a search. That's one thing to know. But they might pat you down or frisk you to see if they decide to place you under arrest or if they have a valid search warrant signed by a judge. And I'll get into the search warrants in a minute. It's really important to not physically resist or reach for your belongings without permission, even if you think ICE agents are overstepping and are acting unfairly or unlawfully and shouldn't be arresting you. This is not the time to physically resist. We'll talk about what to do when your rights are violated. And so just a reminder that race and ethnicity are not valid reasons to stop or arrest anyone. And that said, the reason for a stop may not be readily apparent, and you might have a reason to believe that you were profiled or stopped based solely on your race or your ethnicity or your language or how you dress. And it's important to carefully document, like take notes, take photos, whatever you can to gather evidence that indicate, just generally the circumstances of the arrest, but also why you think you might have been targeted. And this is kind of an underlying theme, but unconstitutional actions or violations of our rights often cannot be resolved as they're occurring. It's all something that has to kind of be addressed later on. And so it's really important to document and try or record as much as possible about the interaction so that the unlawful behavior can be challenged later or reported later. We'll move on. And so just the basics about being arrested are that ICE and police officer, well, we'll stick with ICE. ICE cannot lawfully arrest you unless they have probable cause to believe you're in the country in violation of U.S. law. And they have, and that the person is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained for their arrest. So that's there's a second part to that. And oftentimes if they're encountering people on the street, that's something likely they can assert. They can also, they can't lawfully arrest you unless they have a reason, another circumstance, let me slow down. Another circumstance in which they can arrest you is if they have reason to think you violated an immigration related law. And then lastly, they can arrest you if they have a valid arrest warrant. So it's, of course, it's possible that ICE can hold someone without constitutional, outside of the Constitution. And again, for your safety and to prevent a situation from escalating, don't physically resist. Instead, again, document the interaction. And once you're able to try to reach out to a lawyer to report, to get some advice about what to do next. Okay, another really important thing to do is to not sign anything before talking to a lawyer. And there are many accounts of ICE coercing people into signing away their rights, and which will prevent them from fighting their immigration case in court. Or they might threaten them with prosecution if they decline to sign. And I can speak from personal experience where I had a client who was forced to sign a document that he couldn't even understand. It was not his not language he spoke. So just to say, it's really critical to talk to a lawyer before signing any documents. And so we're going to get into what to do if you're stopped by ICE while you're in a car. And there are two particular scenarios. We'll talk about cars, and then we'll also talk about what if ICE comes to your home. And in these scenarios, much of what I've already covered will apply, but there are some additional elements just to keep in mind. And as we continue to develop, as we continue to develop Know Your Rights materials, please keep an eye on our website. But so in New Jersey, drivers must carry their driver's license vehicle and proof of insurance in all their vehicles. And you present only your state issued license or another valid US issued document for identification. You shouldn't be showing any false or foreign identification. And ICE cannot search your car unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. You should ask to see a warrant, and if they don't present the valid warrant, and search your car anyway, state clearly that you're not consenting to a search. And then if ICE comes to your home, we'll cover that scenario. Do not open the door. ICE agents must have a warrant signed by a judge to enter your home without consent. If officers say they have a warrant to enter your home, it's really important for you to see it and not open the door to see it. You can have them put it up to a window. You can have them slide it under your door, but you want to be able to inspect the warrant before opening your door. And in just a minute, I'm going to review some of the elements of how to identify whether it's a valid warrant. But you should know that in addition, this is another time when ICE engages in ruses they will use subterfuge to try to get you to come outside of your home or to open your door. And you should avoid doing that at all costs. And so if ICE asks to enter or search your home without a valid warrant, you have a right to refuse. And if they enter anyway, again, you shouldn't be physically resisting, and clearly state that you do not consent to the search. Please remember that your priority should be your safety and the safety of the people in your home. And if you're arrested in your home, ICE officers are allowed to search within your home in the area close by you, but they shouldn't be searching beyond that. Okay, so now let's get into what is a valid warrant. On a valid arrest warrant, it should name the person. It should have it should state that the person is living at the address listed and that the person is present in the home. In a search warrant, it should have the name of it doesn't need the name of a particular person. It will just have the name of the address, and it will provide detailed places or objects to search and name what they're looking for. And so those are kind of the buckets of information on the warrant, the arrest warrant and the search warrant. And so you should note that ICE has a document, that form I-205, that's called a warrant of removal. And that it's not the same thing. They use the word warrant, but again, they're like, it's a way to undermine what a judicial warrant is, right? So I'll show you what the not a valid warrant is. So this is the warrant for arrest of alien. And I'm not sure how closely you can see it. And I'll put a link later in the chat with a link to more clear documents about it. But this usually has language at the top that says it's from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It's usually signed by an immigration officer and not a federal judge. And it sometimes will have like document numbers on it. And so there are different titles to it, but the key point is that it's signed by an immigration officer who works for the Department of Homeland Security and not by a court. And so on the other hand, a valid judicial warrant is issued by a court. It's signed by a federal judge, like a district court judge or a magistrate judge, sometimes a state court judge. But at the top of I'm like pointing to my own screen, not helpful for you, but at the top of the document, it will name the court. It will say United States District Court, or it will say Superior Court of New Jersey. And then it will, at the bottom, it will indicate the title that it's signed by a federal judge or a state judge. And so that's really critical to understand the difference between the two warrants. All right, so we have to remember that you can exercise your right to remain silent. You should make clear that you do not consent to search. You should never lie or present false documents, and you shouldn't sign any documents before speaking with a lawyer. Also remember to try to stay as calm as you can, and depending on your status is how you're going to decide whether or not to show any documents to an ICE officer. So one key element is to be prepared. So if you or someone you know is at risk of being arrested by ICE, it's good to make a plan ahead of time with family and friends. And it may sound scary, but it's definitely better to be prepared. And so that can mean things like memorizing important phone numbers, making emergency plans with people you trust, including for childcare, and then kind of gathering and securing important documents ahead of time and making sure that your friends or family know where those are located. And that can help, with your immigration proceedings in court. So that's one important element. And there are resources out there to help people prepare. And I know some of our coalition partners have kits for that. And so I can make sure to put some of that in the links in the chat as well. All right, so another thing to do is if you're at risk of an encounter with ICE, some of these principles that I've reviewed, it's really important to practice them out loud. We're on Zoom, so we can't really do that, but it can just having the kind of muscle memory to remember to say, like, am I free to leave? Do you have a warrant? I choose to remain silent. I do not consent to search. Like, role playing with your friends or just kind of getting in the habit of saying that can be really important in the moment. So, and then if you're an observer of ICE enforcement or any kind of law enforcement that you think is is something you want to observe, you have the right to observe them. You're not allowed to physically interfere with law enforcement, but you have it's a constitutional right for you to photograph or film law enforcement, including ICE activity in public areas. And so one way I think about it is if you're allowed to stand there in a public space, you're allowed to record there. And so if you are ordered to, move back or quiet down, you can comply with that, but you're allowed to keep your camera rolling. And that's something that we actually had to fight in the courts about, but that is definitely a right now. So please document as much as you can, including the date or the time, where you are, what you're observing, if you were able to get the agents' names or badge numbers, and then share the information you've learned with activists or advocates and activists. We're part of a coalition that's gathering this information, and so so you're more than welcome to send it to the ACLU of New Jersey or to other people who are tracking ICE enforcement actions. And so if you or someone have had their rights violated, this is, again, important to have everything documented. And of course, if anyone's been injured, they should absolutely be seeking medical attention and taking photos of those injuries. But it's important to, sorry about that. It's important to contact a lawyer as soon as possible to discuss what your options might be. You're welcome to contact the ACLU of New Jersey. We have a complaint form on our website, and I have our intake email address here. I should say that a lot of the information we hear from the public, we are not in a position to represent or provide legal advice to folks, but we do track this information and look for patterns and practices by ICE and other law enforcement officers. So, and if we know if it's kind of part of a pattern or practice, we might follow up, or we might refer somebody to other resources that might be available to them. So, this is one of those moments where you might know your rights, you might be able to assert them, and you still might end up having them violated. So we want to hear from you if that's happened. So that's kind of the bulk of the information about what to do about ICE enforcement. And then I did want to talk to you for a moment about ICE and schools. And so it used to be the case until January that ICE maintained a policy that at one point was called protected areas or sensitive locations. But essentially what they said was, hey, we know that it's important for people to go to the doctor, go to school, schools, healthcare, places of worship. And they had a policy of not engaging in enforcement operations in those sensitive locations. But they now do permit enforcement operations at or near schools. And so there are many of us who've been, trying to educate folks about that and about that change in policy, and also to again remind remind you that immigrant children have rights too. And federal and state laws protect immigrant students, protect all students, regardless of their immigration status. And actually, the ACLU of New Jersey just this week, in partnership with the New Jersey Consortium for Immigrant Children and the Education Law Center, sent a letter to 675 school districts across the state, every school district that we could get information on, to provide them guidance about how to protect the rights of their students. And so I will again put a copy of that letter in the chat for you. But generally speaking, schools should be putting in place procedures and train staff on how to respond if ICE shows up at their doors. And again, a lot of the same principles apply, which is that if ICE doesn't have a warrant to enter non-public spaces of the school, schools should be put a procedure in place to review the request from ICE. And we're we don't think they should be entering schools without a warrant. And schools have the right to not comply with ICE requests to come into the building. So, and that's something that they should train staff up on. Schools should be avoiding asking their students or families about any immigration status. And so, there are many federal and state laws that protect children from discrimination based on their national origin, their nationality, their ancestry. And then there are laws that protect student privacy around access to student records that can only be accessed with a warrant or a subpoena. So we're going over the next several weeks, we're going to be rolling out additional resources to provide to communities regarding ICE enforcement in or around schools. And we'll be sharing those with your PTA and hoping to, be able to answer any questions about that. So I'm gonna, next, I have Q&A, which I'll get to in a second. I'm gonna stop sharing in a second, but I want to just leave you with a couple of our links. So if you want any more information, you're welcome to contact us at info@aclu-nj.org. We also have a Know Your Rights page. /KYR is the shortcut to that. I'm going to put up, we have a QR code I will leave up for a second in case anybody wants to get directly to our printed materials on what I just covered. And we have those also in Spanish. And then I know that the PTA also has some materials. And so there's a QR code for your PTA's immigration resources. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And
okay, we can have the rest of the panelists come back on their video. And if we want to do Q&A at this time, we do have two ways to do it. We have the Q&A box, which is located to the bottom of your screen, which has the question mark, and our panelists can open that as well on their screen. And you can type your question into that. Or if you'd like, you can use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Once you push that, I can recognize you and you can physically ask your question to our panel. And with the Q&A, Jeanne, if you'd like me to either to read the question to you, if that's easier.
I can read it.
Okay.
I have it up. So there's a question in the Q&A about recommendations of children carrying passports or other kinds of ID with them. I would say generally, like as U.S. citizens, we're not required. If you're a U.S. citizen, you're not required to provide to carry proof of citizenship on you. If a child is of a particular immigration status, it's not recommended that people carry foreign documents with them. And so I really recommend that parents try to get some advice from an immigration attorney depending on their particular status.
Okay, Also, with the raise your hand feature, I do want to note that your name will not be displayed on the recording or anything like that if you're worried about that. Along with the Q&A, you can also do that anonymously. So when the recording does go out, the name will be blocked. So if you had any worries about that.
I wonder if, while we're waiting on any other questions, I just wanted to note that we have been talking with the district, and maybe Felix, if you want to speak to this, that the district does have some protocols in place along the lines of what Jeanne mentioned, as far as what happens if an ICE agent shows up to a school. So I could toss to you, Felix, to discuss that. I also just wanted to mention that, with this crowd, obviously I don't know for sure, but if folks here, regardless of your status, your document, whether you're documented or not, I feel like this is important information for us to know as a community, so we can support our neighbors. The more people that know this stuff, the better. So whether it directly affects us or not, sharing this information, sharing how to find this information is really important. And we have a resource hub, which I think will flash again. I know Jeanne mentioned sharing a bunch of links. Unfortunately, the chat function is disabled, but
Yeah,
if you
I
send
noticed
that to
that.
us, we will update our resource hub. We also have red cards, which perhaps folks have seen, which have a sort of a brief breakdown of what your rights are and what you can say to an ICE agent. You can reach out to us. We can get those to folks. We have them in Spanish, English, and Haitian Creole. So that's a good resource. But yeah, Felix, I don't know if you want to talk about from a district protocol standpoint.
Sure, sure. Thank you. So the district protocol, much as was already described, if ICE does come to the school, the protocol that staff have been clearly, it's been communicated to them, is to, unless they are the office staff, is to remain silent, say, I can't assist you with this. Now, typically, when anyone comes to the school, it is the office staff that is the first to interact with the visitor. At that point, when ICE identifies themselves as ICE, the office staff immediately tells them, I need to have my immediate supervisor, usually it's the principal, address you. The office staff communicates with the principal. The principal then goes communicates with the ICE agent and states the same. I need to communicate this with my superintendent. I'm not authorized to evaluate the validity of the warrants that you say you have. So then the principal contacts the superintendent as well as the district's attorney. At that point, either or the district superintendent or the district attorney will come to the school, will ask to see the documentation, and the attorney would be there to evaluate the validity again of the warrants. At that point, as has already been described, make sure that it is the correct warrant. And if it is, at that point, the parents will be communicated as well, or anyone who is on that the emergency form contact list. So we do advise that parents do update that list with the most accurate information, especially under these circumstances, if there are particular points of contact that they want to be called or contacted. If a power of attorney has already been set in place, make sure that person is on that list. So the parent would be contacted. And again, if the warrant is determined to be a valid warrant, then the school administrator would be the one who would then go to the classroom or locate the student. No other staff member is able to do that. By no means would ICE be able to be given permission to enter and roam the building looking for whoever they're looking for. That would not be the case. Another part of the protocol is that the West Orange Police Department would be called to make sure that security and the safety of the school community is protected for the reasons what if these people are not ICE agents at all and they're just a criminal who's pretending to be as such and trying to get into a building? They want to have the West Orange Police Department there to protect the safety of the school community. They will not be there to support ICE in carrying out what they say that they're there for. So it is for them to be there to protect the safety of the school community. And that's the protocol. And I believe, and not that I believe it, I know that that's typically the protocol that is, for the most part, carried out in all or being implemented in most districts and school communities. So that's the protocol if ICE comes to the building.
It's great to hear that you're all you have a protocol in place, and
Yeah,
it sounds
and also
really
to
strong.
follow a lot of the other recommendations are in terms of student privacy. I know that you mentioned that this district does have FERPA, follows the FERPA laws, and we do not request or ask students for any questions that reveal their immigration status. Um, we we don't share our student information as part of we have several policies in place, whether it's an immigration issue or non, that's just a policy we have. We don't share that information, nor do we ask immigration questions or questions that would reveal their immigration status. So I wanted to add that as well. Thank you.
Okay, again, if you have any questions that you would like to ask any of our panelists, you can use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen if you're on your phone. If you just tap your screen, all the icons will show up. iPads is usually at the top. Or if you feel more comfortable in the Q&A, which is the box with the question mark in it, you can type in your question and it can be remained anonymous. And again, if you don't feel comfortable speaking with us, we will block out any names during the recording.
While might be waiting for other questions, I did want to mention specifically a couple of organizations that are reputable, and if you have particular information you're looking for around the new policies, you might want to, first of all, there's ACLU.org and then ACLU-NJ.org. And then there's the American Immigration Council, AIC. I don't know what their website is off the top of my head. And then there's the National Immigration Law Center, which is also known as NILC. So that's something easily Googleable, but they have great resources and toolkits and FAQs on these policies. And these are national organizations, so they're able to provide national context for that.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. And if others have questions, please don't hold back. I was wondering, Jeanne, if you could touch on the Immigrant Trust Directive, as it stands now, and then the idea of it becoming the Immigrant Trust Act actually signed in New Jersey law. Do you have any insight into that process? And how much weight does it hold as a directive? And maybe explaining the basics for folks.
Sure. So the Immigrant Trust Directive is a policy issued by the state attorney general, and it governs all law enforcement agencies in New Jersey. And it essentially is a policy that's meant to disentangle local law enforcement from immigration enforcement. And at its heart is that we want our communities safe, and a key part of public safety is people being able to come forward and report crimes and serve as witnesses and seek the police when they need them, whether it's a restraining order or what have you. And if immigrants don't feel safe going to the police, like if they are fearful of deportation and being separated from their family by going to the police, that makes our communities less safe. And so this directive was passed to really focus on public safety, have New Jersey's law enforcement officers focused on public safety. And so it prevents them from engaging in particular immigration enforcement with some exceptions. And so that's a statewide policy. It's been in place for many years now, it's probably 6 or 7 years at this point. And so the Immigrant Trust Act would make that a state law. But also, it does more. It isn't just about law enforcement, but about other state agencies that might interface with immigration enforcement. And so it's to really kind of separate out the state services and that we need from the federal detention and deportation system. And it also creates data privacy protections and things like that, and would just really kind of draw clear lines around federal immigration enforcement and what our local state law enforcement and government services are supposed to provide. And so New Jersey's lawmakers need to hear from you if you support this kind of policy. And so on our ACLU of New Jersey's webpage under Take Action, you can go there and fill out a form to send your lawmakers a letter about supporting the Immigrant Trust Act and encouraging them to act now. It's really important now more than ever for our lawmakers to be responding to this assault on our immigrant communities. That's happening at the federal level. We need to step up as New Jerseyans, and our lawmakers need to hear from us about that. And so I really thank you, Kiara, for asking the question, and I really hope you all can get engaged on this very important issue.
Thank you. And I ask another legislative question. Are you aware on the federal level of a bill to reinstate protected areas in the works?
I have heard that there's rumblings about the sensitive locations being part of a congressional bill. I don't know enough about that. For the most part, the ACLU of New Jersey really focuses on what's happening in our state, and we rely on our national colleagues to kind of tease out what's happening at the federal level, although we, of course, are like trying to get our lawmakers to do the right thing. But I don't have a lot of information about that. But I also, with the way Congress is, it's hard to know what will move, even if it's introduced.
Exactly. It came up at the National PTA Legislative Conference, which was held last week virtually, and they urged folks to, fill out an email and send. So I was going to bring it to the attention potentially of the PTA.
Oh, that's terrific.
As well. Yeah, as a step. And another question I had specific to encounters with ICE, in order to be able to communicate with ICE, how does that work when someone can't speak English, an ICE official doesn't speak their native language, like going beyond, a couple of phrases, what is a person entitled to if they, are having translation issues?
Yeah, that's really difficult, not just in the ICE enforcement context, but in law enforcement context generally. I will say that the red cards are a really important key in helping people assert their rights, regardless of language barriers. And a lot of there are red cards available in different languages. I will say that we're working on getting some, and so in a couple months, you can check back on our website to see about getting some in different languages from us. But that is, I think advocates are really thinking about those barriers and how to bridge those gaps. And I think providing Know Your Rights materials in different languages, and we have cards on our website. We have our Know Your Rights FAQ kind of questions on our website in English and Spanish. And I know a lot of other national organizations have a range of languages. So part of it's just making sure that our community, we can get the information to communities so that they can be prepared, doing that across languages.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we have a bunch printed already. We got some templates that we created as well. So if in your school communities, if you'd like to print more, again, we have them in Spanish, English, and Haitian Creole. Those are the predominant languages in our district. We got it from another national-based organization that provided a template. We're trying to get those out at any PTA event that we have. But please reach out to that advocacy email if you would like some for your school or the template to print them, and we'll support in any way we can.
tremendous resource you're providing to your schools. That's really
Thank
great.
you. Yeah, we also have there's a warrant example on the resource hub, which is very important, as well as the power of attorney form. Obviously, that is a requires some extra steps as far as legal representation and notary. But we are trying to work in smaller groups that, that's more to come there to try to provide access points to that, understanding that that's more of a person-to-person thing and sensitivities around documentation. But that form is also available on the hub.
And even just reminding families to update their information on who can pick their children up from school, like those
Right.
kinds of documents, or just, now that we're, towards the end of the year, things might have changed. And so having that up to date is an important thing to remind folks.
So we actually have a question in the chat here.
Oh, great. So the question is specifically about, are you required to open your house and speak with ICE officers? And what if you just don't open the door? And you are, unless they show a warrant, you do not have to open your doors. And you can just keep the door closed and wait for them to leave. That is absolutely within your rights under the Constitution. They have to have a warrant to enter your home. And like I said earlier, there might be times when they try to lure you out with different kinds of enticements, or suggesting that you come out and just talk to them, and you can absolutely ignore them unless they show you a warrant signed by a judge. Thanks for the question.
Okay, once again, if you'd like to ask a question with our panelists, you can use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen, or type it right into the Q&A chat box.
Right, Jeanne, I'd just like to just thank you again for highlighting the different immigration statuses that exist. Many people may think or not realize, and I know, frankly, I wasn't, and I'm in the field of ESL, world languages, I wasn't as aware of all the different statuses that exist. Many people may think that it's either documented or undocumented, but there are people who are at different phases of their status process, and they are, under these circumstances, they are fearful. Even if they are, which in our community, many, if not most, are going through that status process. So this information is helpful for them, and also for all of us to realize, that people can be detained, even though, as you've stated several times throughout your presentation, it's their rights are not being really followed,
Right.
and it can happen. Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because even if for myself, citizen, do I want to be detained and potentially be detained for a week, 2 weeks? How would that impact my work? Knowing that I will get out because I am within my rights, but there's still the complications that can add to my life. And people are fearful for that. So this information you're providing, again, thank you. And people knowing their rights does not, or the need to know their rights doesn't mean that they are undocumented and shouldn't be here, which is a lot of the rhetoric that is being heard now. So thank you again for that.
You're so welcome. And things are changing so rapidly that it's really important to, keep up to date on this. And even, over the weekend, we saw that a lawful permanent resident with a green card was arrested because of his political views. And so the way they're enforcing the laws is becoming retaliatory and like nothing we've ever seen before. And so, we're going to fight that in court. That and all of the other kinds of challenges to our rights. But in the meantime, it's really important that we all be armed with information to do our best on the streets.
Okay, at this time, we have no other hands raised or any Q&A questions.
I'm very, very grateful to you, Jeannie, for doing this. It's so important for our community and all of us being informed. Again, our committee, this advocacy committee came up very quickly, and it's grown, which is great, and a lot of energy there. So we want to keep that going. And while we're focusing on immigration now, the hope is to continue working on other, at-risk communities and things like that. In this new, trying time, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, so I think maybe we can put that slide back up with how to contact us, if that's okay, Lauren.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then Christine, please, if there's other things you wanted to, no. Yeah, so please let's stay engaged. We live in a diverse, robust community, and we can feel very detached from one another. But hopefully information like this can provide can be a source of just information for our community. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Eric, I'd like to add also that on the district website, specifically under the For Parents tab, we will be having these resources posted there by early next week. There was a Spanish video, a Spanish presentation done also that will be on the website there. Again, on the district website under For Parents. There will be a link there to the resources, and thank you to the PTA group who really has done an outstanding job of curating all of these materials.
We also have a pre-recorded one in Haitian Creole that's available on the hub as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so I guess that's it. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and thank you to our panelists and all of our attendees. And thank you to all who will be watching this recording in the future. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.